Welcome, everybody, to the show. Today, we've got a very special interview. I've got David Craddock, who is, if I'm correct, the writer and co director of First Person Shooter. Give me the exact title.
So it's FPS first person shooter. And if you want to include the subtitle, it's the Definitive FPS Documentary. So do not do shots while you're saying this title because it will go poorly.
I thought so. It's almost a tongue twister. So.
It really is. It really is.
All right. Well, I've got a limited amount of your time, but first I want to thank you for allowing me to screen the documentary. I kind of caught it late in its advertising cycle there because I think you guys were doing things like certain levels, kind of like a Kickstarter thing, where you would offer people their names in the credits and things like that. And you were offering both physical and digital. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, correct. Right. And the nice thing about this documentary is it's evergreen. So there'll be more opportunities to get your hands on it if you missed out, in one campaign or the next, and we'll talk more about that. But don't worry, more chances are coming.
Awesome. Well, I've had the chance, guys, to watch this. It is clocks in at a little over 4.5 hours. Was your goal to beat the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League?
Yes, and also for it to be miles better, and I think we succeeded on both fronts.
You did. Plus, it's in color. Although I did appreciate the black and white on Zack Snyder.
Right.
It's funny because we actually on my live shows on Tuesdays we somehow did a 4.5 hour stream live. Don't know how we did it. Zach would have been proud of us.
He would have.
All right. So I want to thank you again for letting me watch the whole thing. You gave me a screener. It was pretty cool because you said it's going to be a screener, and it was flat out just like the screeners I may or may not have seen on the internet back in the days for movies.
Right.
Where they actually said this was mailed to the, whatever for consideration. I'm like, there's my email address. He knows I'm not going to share this now. Okay.
Yep. There you go. Yeah.
So that was really cool. I got to tell you, whoever you're using for that, the copy protection they're using, incredible, because I couldn't stream the darn thing to a TV wirelessly.
Wow.
It stopped that flat out.
That's the thing with DRM and anti-piracy stuff. You trust people, but also you hate to make it a pain for them to engage with whatever you're giving them. I don't even know completely how it works. What I do is message Robin Block, the executive producer and creator of the film, and say, Robin, we have a spreadsheet. So I'm like, can you give me a screener code for line, I think you were line 56 or something. And then I just pass on the code, and whatever happens from there, I don't know. But at least you got to watch it and you enjoyed it. So
I did. It took me a couple of sittings. I don't have 4.5 hours to watch it at one shot. So I made the time to make some popcorn and watch it here in front of the computer 3 nights in a row, or almost 3 out of 4 nights.
The same way I do. I don't know. I think I can count on 2 fingers the number of times I've been able to sit down and watch it front to back, because I'm also watching to make sure everything's correct.
Oh yeah,
stuff. But
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, and on top of letting me watch the screener, thanks for giving me this opportunity to interview you. I think
pleasure.
My viewers are really going to appreciate what went behind the scenes on this. 'Cause it's funny. The documentary is almost a behind the scenes of the first person shooter genre. Now here we are doing a behind the scenes of the behind the scenes.
That's
but
right.
I think this will
Inception noise. Yeah.
I think it'll definitely give the viewers a taste for what it is, and I want every single person that visits my channel to go check this out, because I think right now it's 24 and change on their website today.
$24.99. Yeah.
It's a steal for that, definitely. All right, so for the people who aren't familiar with you, tell us a little bit about your works covering video games, how you got into it, and what was the driver behind this documentary?
Sure. So we're recording this in early September 2023. In about 4 months, I'll have hit the 20-year marker of being a professional writer, which means I got paid most of the time. There are peaks and valleys in these jobs. I've published over 30 books, some self-published, some traditionally published, and I got started in this honestly because I've written and published novels as well, but I've always had a special relationship with video games because my Uncle Brad, who's a very formative figure in my life, a father figure, he's always kind of worked in or around the games industry. He was kind of an IT and networking solutions guy for Blizzard North, the division of Blizzard that made Diablo 1 and 2. And
great games.
Yeah, great games, classic games. And I mean, he would just send, like, I was in every Blizzard game beta from Diablo until the WoW Friends and Family Alpha. Um,
Nice.
One of my graduation gifts from him was coming out. I spent a week out with him, and I also got to visit Blizzard North like 6 days before Diablo 2 launched and play a Japanese import PS2. This was like 2 months before it launched here in the States. So this is all pretty cool. So I've always had this fascination, not just with playing games, but meeting the people behind them, and especially writing about games made, I would say, from the 80s to the early 2000s, because every year that passed, the games industry was getting bigger, but development teams weren't necessarily getting too much bigger, right? Like Diablo was made, the core Diablo team was maybe 15 to 20 people. And so when you're that small and scrappy of a team, everyone leaves a very big footprint on the game. You can see their personality shine through. So I would say it's not that Diablo couldn't have been made, but it would have been very different if even one person on that team wasn't there. So that's kind of what we wanted to do with first-person shooters on FPS. About 5 years ago, I wrote a book called Rocket Jump, Quake, and the Golden Age of First-Person Shooters, which is still, you can get it in paperback and Kindle, but it's also free to read on shacknews.com. And that kind of caught the attention of Robin Block, the executive producer of FPS. He had reached out to Richard Moss, my co-writer, first, because Richard wrote a fantastic history of FPS games, an article published, I think, on Ars Technica. And Richard actually recommended me to Robin, and that was cool to me because I've liked and admired Richard and his work for a long time. So the chance to work with him was the first motivator. And when I joined, Richard had already written a synopsis. Like, here's ideally the FPS games we could cover. There were like 100 games or something. So that not all of those are going to make the cut. But we launched the Kickstarter, and in the summer of 2021, I started out as an advisor and then as a producer because I was contributing more and more. I also, through writing about FPS games, I had a pretty deep Rolodex of contacts. John Carmack has said I'm one of the only people who can get him out of his programming cave to talk about the old days of id Software and stuff, which is very flattering, right? So after I think a week into Kickstarter, Robin called me and said, I want you to co-direct and lead the writing effort on this. And that was really cool. And Richard and I worked on scripts, and I got very close with Richard and also extremely close with my co-director and our editor, Chris Stratton. He's a great guy. He took every script I gave him and just brought it to life, either exactly as I saw it or better, usually better, because he's just such a visionary. And that was 2.5 years ago. All this started.
Wow.
So that today.
All right, well, let's go ahead and give the viewers a taste of this documentary. I've got several of the teasers you gave us, and I want to start off with the very first one, because I think the first game we actually talk about is Doom, or at least we talk about id Software. So let me go ahead and pull that up here and give the folks a tease. And I like these
If
intros
a room
here,
could have been
too.
made in Wolfenstein,
Yeah.
we failed.
That
So
wall of
we need to
games.
just like change everything. What's going to really stand out? To me, it felt like it was going to be contrast. Contrast in light, contrast in space, and contrast
And I like
in
how
gameplay.
we've got the
I started to make a
interviews
room
over
that had
the games
scale.
and stuff.
So I was like, forget
Yeah, I
that
could tell you a
ceiling
lot of
that we were
stories
using for
about just
Wolfenstein.
this
So I made a room
segment,
that
too.
was really high,
bet.
side areas that were really high up, that had light in them and
This
really
is great, 'cause
bright. So
I've
the
actually been
room's
telling my
dark.
viewers
These
to
really
watch
high,
some
bright
other
areas have
video game
monsters
documentaries
up
as
there
well. You familiar
throwing
with
fireballs
High
down
Score
at
on
you, so we're not
Netflix?
on the same plane
Yeah,
being
I haven't
attacked.
seen it yet, though,
but I
but I've
needed the
heard
player
that
to
it's
see it because it would look
stuff.
really cool
One
to
of their
see something
6
that high
episodes is
up.
actually
I
on
had the light
first-person
going and the
shooters.
monsters and the
Okay.
scale,
Pretty
angled
cool.
walls, all these
right,
things
let me
that
go
like
ahead and get
this
that
room
off.
could
So
not
you guys can
exist in
see here,
Wolfenstein.
we've got
So I was very happy that I was able
interviews
to make
with
something that was both
the makers of these
faster and in
games,
some ways higher
showing
quality
footage and
by
talking
making a
over the
slightly
whole thing.
different set
It's
of
great.
trade-offs while still getting all this new
And
flexibility
there's John
with
Carmack,
the
of
angled
course.
walls,
And
which
again,
really defined
I've met
the
him
Doom
before, so I
map-making
can imagine what
space.
it's like
So the
to
hardest came in and
get
Tom
him
came
to
in,
sit down
and they're
and
just like,
talk for
yeah,
a few minutes.
that's what we're talking
And
about.
let alone
that's
how
how we
much
need to
time
make
you
this
got
game.
with him. So let's get that off the screen here. Bada bing, bada boom. And what did I have next in questions? All right, so guys, that's a taste of this 4.5-hour documentary of the first-person shooter genre. There are many great interviews and quotes in this film. And what I like about it is we had everyone talking about everything in this. You didn't just have Carmack and Romero talking about stuff on id Software. I recall later in the documentary watching Romero talk about everybody else's games and
Yeah.
just, saying how what I loved was everyone talking about how they played other people's games too.
Yeah.
That was cool.
It was really important to establish that because so Creator VC is our production company, Robin's production company, and they have a certain not a formula but a certain outline for their documentaries, such as the critically acclaimed In Search of Darkness trilogy on 80s horror. And Robin said, like, you have a lot of freedom with like telling a story, but we use these, in Search of Darkness, it's like these walls of movie posters, and ours it's a wall of FPS big box art. And he said, like, that's how we kind of transition from game to game. But we didn't have anything like a narrator. So when I sat down to look at this script, I thought, well, we're going to go in rough chronological order. So what I want to do is kind of establish a through line of here's some games you've never heard of. Like, most people haven't played Maze War or The Colony, for example. And then we're going to go into id Software. And then we're going to talk about the Doom clones, as the genre was called, right? Like,
Yes,
the other
yeah, it was.
who were inspired.
Even Quake and stuff were labeled Doom clones for a while.
Exactly. We did a live or virtual premiere with some of our backers this past weekend, and a lot of them got a kick out of the fact that I put Doom 2 as the first Doom clone. I'm like, well, it was literally the first Doom clone. It just had a 2 after it. And so, there's this through line of, hey, we're building on this, and it was important to show that, not only so you would have an understanding of, hey, here's how Doom inspired this, and here's how this inspired that, but also you could see, like, wow, all these folks were fans of these games. So by the time you get to halfway through the documentary, you've got people going, I played Doom and I wanted to make a first-person shooter. It's just this snowball that gets bigger and bigger as you go.
Yeah, it definitely was kind of a big, igniter in the genre for sure. Now, back in the day, this is late 90s, I actually got to meet Carmack and Romero at a QuakeCon.
Wow, nice.
I managed to place somewhere in the top 10. My clan Jalapeno, was really big at the time in the late 90s. And so several of us actually took our computers, and as you showed in the documentary, these LAN parties, a QuakeCon is part of the biggest LAN party around. Yeah. I remember them taking a ballroom of a giant hotel in Mesquite, and we were all out there, many of us with our own carts, hauling big tube monitors and our computers, and, just rows and rows of tables, of course, in a very dark environment, just all playing games, waiting for our turn to compete. Right. So now back then, and this is for me, I want to say my late 20s, early 30s, they were rock stars to us.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they really were. I mean, when you saw John Romero walk into the hotel, the hair was flowing in slow motion and everything. I swear to God, it was. I don't know how he pulled it off. Okay, and I think he actually, kind of like a spoof on. I think this was a Simpsons thing where he had his own background music playing as he's walking. You could just picture him walking in the room. How was there anybody in this group that you guys interviewed that gave you that awestruck feeling as you're making this documentary?
I think some people just have it. They're just so engaging to talk to, and with every answer you get a little more insight into how their mind worked back then and still works now. I've talked to Romero, for example, for countless hours. In fact, this year at San Diego Comic-Con, he asked me to interview him on stage in a panel about his memoir, Life in First Person, Doom Guy.
Yes, that's when he actually voiced himself, right? The audiobook?
He narrated the audiobook as well. And so I'm really just, it's fun for me. The way I do interviews with everybody is I just think of them as conversations. I'm sitting down with John Romero, we're cracking open drinks, and we're going to talk about some games, And I would say probably one person I felt that way about during this filming at FPS. I'd never talked to Cliff Bleszinski before this, so it was less intimidation and more like, this is so cool.
He's from Microsoft, right?
Cliff, it was the creator of Unreal, and then Gears of War after that, so Epic. And it was just cool to really like kind of hear his stories about what it was like, being part of this foundational time in FPS games where people were kind of starting to still admire and respect Doom and Quake, but also think about beyond that. Like, what can we build worlds? Can we tell stories? And so it was really cool to talk to him and hear about that.
All right, and speaking of rock stars, there is one voice in this industry that stands out amongst all the rest. Let me go ahead and just show a quick clip on this one here. That would be our man Duke. And I loved how you guys did this segment.
I'm here to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of gum. They love that one.
Duke Nukem added a level of tongue-in-cheek machismo to the first-person shooter genre.
If the only thing you know about first-person shooter is Doom and Quake,
and again, this is what I like, is having everybody from other parts of the industry talking about these games. This is great.
And we also wanted to show, like, I think if you just show a game like this in isolation, you might not get a sense of how big a deal it is. The more people you have talking about it, you realize, wow, I reached so many people.
Yeah, that's a lot of context.
I mean, that was the first time I think I played a game where the character
and then,
had like
you
a
got
personality,
folks from
more like a
the
90s
industry
action
itself
film,
and stuff.
Last Action Hero, Demolition Man, like all these movies
and it's
had
funny,
a bit of like an
I didn't even
awareness
know
and,
that
like,
a lot of the lines in Duke
factor.
Nukem came from all these movies.
Don't give up your day job.
It's so cool to
The
learn,
folks
right?
at
That's what we wanted to
Cryptic
show
and at
the
3D
clips.
Realms and
right
Apogee,
next to
they
it.
came up with all the lines.
Yeah, no, that
They
was
stole most
some great
of them,
stuff. A lot of that
obviously.
I had
Duke
not even
Nukem's lines
known.
were mostly stolen.
I have come here
There we go.
to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of
Yeah,
bubble.
they just kind of flipped that, right? Kick ass and chew bubblegum.
That was just too uncanny. I did not realize that all of those came from these movies. That was eye-opening because, again, I played the heck out of Duke Nukem. And
same.
we're talking back in the day of custom PCs, dual video cards, SLI, things that nobody knows existed anymore.
Right.
The modern gamers. They didn't know you had to go ahead and get 2 Voodoo graphics cards and put them in two, and then join them together some way, shape, or form, like parallel
Yeah.
processing.
It
was
some
a cool
Frankenstein's
time.
monster stuff for sure. Yeah.
There was, and a lot of these games actually started implementing 5.1 audio into their games too, to get your immersion in there. And I recall having, I forget who the manufacturer was at the time, but I literally had a 5.1 system on a U-shaped desk wrapped around me with little stands for these little micro speakers.
Man.
Yeah, it was.
That's awesome.
That's
awesome.
It was a heck of a setup, and again, it not just the whole first-person part, but they really tried to immerse you in the game. This is pre, virtual reality, but once games started going and looking left and right and up and down, and then they added the sound, it really brought you into the game.
Yeah, that's why we wanted to kind of experiment with telling the story about how the genre even got its name. Today we know them as FPSs, but even before they were Doom clones, like nobody knew what to call them. They were called like virtual reality games, virtual reality action games, because no games had ever taken you, had immersed you at that level before. I mean, we even show in the film, like some early computer RPGs did, like Ultima 1 or Bard's Tale. You go to the dungeons, you get a first-person view, but obviously it was very primitive because it was the tech of the time, but also that wasn't the point of the game, to be exploring dungeons in first person. So it was really the closest anybody had seen to virtual reality at the time.
And I like a lot of the other references you had there. Again, you talked about Ultima 1. To me, one of my first ones was Wizardry. Going through those very same tunnels, that were drawn like that. And you even showed a little bit of third persons in there to kind of get a point of view in this. I think you had a little bit of Laura Croft sneaking in there and things like that when they were talking about characters, especially in character design. But so this thing spans about 30 years for me, looking over this. And I played both solo, deathmatch, and I didn't actually realize how many of these games I played. It's funny, you start going down the list and seeing that wall, I'm like, I remember Sin. Holy crap, yes. I was waiting for you to actually bring in MDK, to make a mention of that too. And I'm going down and now and I'm watching all this stuff going, oh gosh, shit, did I ever finish that one? I don't remember, and it was wild. Now, out of all of this, and this crosses PCs and game consoles, Were there any of these that were the most memorable to you as you were doing this? This film, you were like, "This is the one I'm going to ask the most questions about. I'm probably going to go ahead and ask too many, but darn it, the heck, I spent 100, hours or days or
Yeah.
whatever playing this game. I need to ask 100 questions." Was there any game like that for you?
Yeah, I mean, so we were talking about Romero earlier. Doom is my favorite FPS and one of my favorite games of all time, and arguably one of the most influential games of all time. For
Now,
as
did
much
you
as I've
play
written,
it back in the day of
oh
shareware?
yeah, oh
Okay.
yeah, I did. Yep, 1993. I learned about Doom. I was in Sunday school class, and we were in the back of the room. My friend Aaron pulled out this PC gaming magazine. He was like, "Look at this! You're going to hell. And you're killing demons." And we got in trouble for talking. I'm like, "Listen, this is the Lord's work right here. Okay, I feel like He would approve this." But for as much as I've written about it, for as much as I've played it, I still have questions about Doom. And I talked to John Romero for about 5 hours. Now, let me give you a little. I'm going to open a window into my life. Okay, the first time I met John, we were talking about this just recently, laughing over it. It was early, would have been 2010 or 2011. I was at Gazillion, which was a company based in Northern California. I was there to meet David Brevik. I was doing interviews for Stay a While and Listen, my book about Blizzard and Diablo.
Mm-hmm.
And then as Dave and I are leaving the office, here comes John, flanked by some programmers, doing the slow-mo, like power walk in a movie, like you were
Yep.
talking about earlier.
Yep.
And we were all standing around in a circle, and they were chatting. And I was like, man, I've got the co-creator of Diablo on my left, the co-creator of Doom, Wolfenstein, 3D, Quake on my right. I didn't know what to say to anybody. I was just a fly on the wall, or a fly on the parking lot in that case. But I'd come so far that 2.5 hours in to my interview with John, he said, "All right, we need to take a break. I have to go to the bathroom." And I was like, "All right, John Romero, I will give you a pee break." Like I'd gone from not being able to talk to this guy to being like, sure, answer nature's call. The all-powerful director here, So it was pretty fun. I mean, I could talk to people about Doom all day, but the nice thing is, it was really fun for me to capture a lot of the gameplay. A lot of the gameplay you see
Yep.
was played by me, as well as our
Cool.
backers. Some of our backers at or above a certain level on Kickstarter and Indiegogo could submit footage we needed. But I played all the id games just because I love those, and I learned a lot about how to get the shots we need. Because you're a pro gamer, right? You know that when you sit down to an FPS, you're rocket jumping, you're bunny hopping, you're circle strafing.
Yep.
Not all of that really plays well on film. It's like, what's going on?
Oh yeah, no, you've really got to capture the right angle and right time.
It's got to be a timing thing and a cinematic thing. So I got a chance to play a lot of the games I'd either never played back in the day or never finished. For example, I had only ever played Deathmatch in Unreal.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I'd only ever played Deathmatch because when I was a senior in high school, our school upgraded from Apple IIs to like Pentium 2s. Mm-hmm. So discs were flying fast and furiously. We were playing Half-Life, we were playing Unreal, we were playing Quake 3, and it was just Deathmatch. So I got a chance to play this campaign and was just so impressed by the world they built and the story they were telling. So it was, I had a lot of questions about that just from playing that and wanting to learn more, go behind
you must have been playing that in emulation or something, because I can't even find the original Unreal available to purchase.
I was just playing it on Steam.
Okay, all right.
Yep, just on Steam. I'm sure there are probably like some source ports or some HD ports, but that was another criteria. We, as much as possible, we didn't want to use a lot of source ports because we wanted these games to look as close to how they looked back then. Because you played all these games. If you see, GZ Doom with mouse look on, jumping, polygonal models, takes you right out of the moment, right? So, Unreal, I just downloaded from Steam. I turned all the settings up to max. You can do that pretty easily in 2022.
Nowadays, yeah.
Yeah. But other than that, we tried to be as authentic as possible.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, a lot of these have been remastered. I mean, even, and we're going to talk about this game a little later on, even the great Half-Life has been remastered and redone community-wise as well as professional-wise. But there's something about seeing it in its old textured glory on these games that brings you back. I think as Quake actually did a re-release here during QuakeCon, on Steam, people who were playing that, and I came across like the RTX version of Quake 2, and I'm like, how have I never heard of this? Was Quake 2 or Quake 3, whichever it was.
Quake
I was
2,
like,
yeah.
there's an RTX version of this. Wow, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to do that. I almost did, and I'm like, all I'm going to see is they made a game, prettier and did a little bit more in lighting, but no, I don't. I want to, maintain that.
I really feel like the artistic direction of those things should be observed and preserved. I mean, there's nothing wrong with playing the RTX versions, but actually, since you brought it up, I don't really like playing them that often, because if you look even at screenshots of Quake 2 RTX, the atmosphere is completely different than what it had intended. And so I kind of feel like if you want to play it that way, more power to you. But for me, I'm always going to stick with the original, because that's how they saw it. That's how they built them.
Exactly. And I think you guys touch on that in the documentary based around Turok.
Yes.
Where, Turok, when that got remade, it's funny. A lot of us look at it and go, oh, wow, the fog. Yeah, it was foggy in the game. Okay, fog of war and all this other stuff in games has usually been created to hide the limitations of the hardware or the software or the engine. And then when you take away things like that, all of a sudden it's kind of like, oh, this looks a lot different, and sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel the same way when you start doing the RTX version of these games. As you're going through the maps, all of a sudden you're actually seeing defects. Sitting in, especially in corners and things like that. All of a sudden, it's like, that doesn't add up, and it's like, no, that's just the way it was, and now you get to see it. So, yeah, I do appreciate, like you said, to play them in their natural state, if possible.
Well, it was interesting. Like, as a point of reference, I go back and I look at the advent of 3D accelerators, as they were called, GPUs now, right?
Yep.
But like what those, like if you look at GL Quake, what that did was
I do recall GL Quake.
Yeah, like that was mind blowing for me. But it looked like the original Quake. It was just sharper, right? It was clearer. It wasn't a distortion or a complete overhaul of the visual direction. That's different than RTX, in my opinion. Like, I think it could work sometimes. I've seen there's some screenshots, I think, of Half-Life or Half-Life 2 RTX, and that looks pretty cool. But only because it kind of preserves the original, visual style.
And in that game, a lot of folks try to preserve things. There's a lot of nostalgia for that, and it came out in an era where it was already, everything's progressed to a good point by the time Half-Life came out anyway.
Right.
So it's not as if you have really older stuff. The difference in texture mapping and graphics and polygons in Half-Life versus going all the way back to Wolfenstein is leaps and bounds.
Yes,
so
it really is.
There wasn't that much to fine tune. It's more the difference of going from, let's say, 1080p to 4K. Is what I would consider what they're doing to Half-Life at this point.
Yeah,
Now,
I would agree with that. And a lot of the versions we use, like I played for Wolfenstein 3D, I used EC Wolf.
Okay.
Specifically, not only because it's easy to get Wolfenstein running, but it has a lot of debug codes that weren't in the original game. So there's a part in Rise of the Triad where Tom Hull's saying, John and I, Romero and I would clip through the walls and pretend we were like gods. And I said, well, I want to recreate that. And sure enough, EC Wolf has a clipping mode. So I was actually able to do that to kind of, set the scene. There were some other tools in that we didn't get to use. Like there's actually a slow-mo mode. But the more we thought about it, the more that didn't make any sense, because Wolfenstein was all about going 100 miles a minute. So you
can go through into 3 different rooms in a heartbeat. Especially when you're backtracking, you're like, oh crap, need food. Oh, I remember that big room had 4 doors, has food. Go back.
That's right.
It's funny you mentioned EC Wolf, because I think that's actually the best way to play it on a Steam Deck, if I'm not correct.
Yeah, and it's cool because, as we've been talking about, it preserves the visual direction. And it adds like little quality of life features. Like you can actually pull up a map, which you did not have in the original Wolf 3D. So that's actually helpful. I like that.
Yep. Now, we've been talking a lot about the PC games here, but first-person shooters kind of made I don't want to call it transition, but they rose to popularity finally in the consoles. Home consoles at the time, back in the day, NES, Sega, Super NES, didn't quite have what it took. And then we got the kind of next generations of consoles. And, I remember and I don't know which I started playing first, but I remember playing Halo at my house in the afternoon, and then going across the street to my neighbor's house and playing GoldenEye 64 over there. It was literally, to me, they were in parallel. I do know they're a little bit separated in time, but to me, those two games were like the first-person shooters, of the console era to me. Matter of fact, let me go ahead and give the viewers a peek at just a little bit of what we have on, GoldenEye and Halo inside the show. Let's see here. Bring that up here and go. This wall, I just love this wall. Is this the wallpaper that you provide? One of the 3 wallpapers?
Put the suit on.
I believe so. I'm not really sure.
And we
what's
weren't
in
sure
the
what we
package.
needed.
I can tell you that
It
Chris
was
Stratton
her and
designed
Duncan
all
Botwood that
those.
did
I
most
got
of it.
box
I
art
would get
for
him set
He
up
built
in the motion
walls.
capture
Did a great
suit.
job.
I would run the actual system, and he would become my
So this was great because we were
body,
talking
if
a
you
lot
like.
about
and we had a
the
magnetic
motion
system
capture
called
in the
Flock of
game.
Birds.
Right.
The
And
system would
some of the
sit on a
stories they
shelf
talk about this
up
are
on the side of the
hilarious.
wall, and wires would run.
I mean,
to
motion
Duncan.
capture
So
back then was a lot
if you
different
can
than it is
imagine, we
now.
had to be
Oh,
extremely
yeah.
careful because the wires were
Oh, this
only
is one of
so
my
long,
favorite
and if
parts
he
too,
wanted to
honestly.
do some epic deaths, we had to sort of like be very precise with it
Yeah,
because literally he would yank the
I actually played
entire thing
GoldenEye,
off the
or started
wall.
playing GoldenEye 64 again when it was re-released on the
And
Nintendo
it was
Switch.
just
That was
Oh,
just
nice.
capture
mind-blowing when
everything
they
we
did
can
that.
and just use it. Once it started going in and we realized that it looked really good, so it's like, okay, well, what if we...
Yeah, I'm not going to
if
spoil
we do
the rest for
shooting body
everybody,
parts, we need to do all
but
the animations for that
let's
as well.
jump
We had a
over
list.
to the Halo teaser.
All right.
Show a little bit about that. The music alone.
Didn't feel as fluid as Quake, or if it didn't give you the precision of Half-Life, it wasn't good enough.
So when it came to starting to play with a controller that had analog controls and we could creep along at our own pace, we could do things that we just never could do.
I think
with
this controller
keyboard and
like
mouse.
sells for
I saw every
a ton of money on
iteration
eBay
of
nowadays. You would get a
controller that
good
they were
one.
working
Yeah,
on. Some of
I
them
think
were
so.
pretty wild. The Duke was just one of 30 wooden prototypes that they brought by
Oh yeah,
that
I
day.
still have.
I remember the first
some of
time I
those
held the
braided
Duke controller, I
cables and
remember thinking I was
extenders and
holding a
stuff for,
giant dinner plate.
Duke
my old
controller
Xbox.
is so big, I almost need a trailer to move it around.
But I
Whenever I
like
went to
how
Japan,
you guys
constant
brought
feedback I
in
would
the whole
get is,
Xbox development
"It's black.
into the
Black
Halo
is the color of
Halo
death."
talk. 'Cause
Yeah.
there's some cool stuff.
X is the
So
letter
just
of death.
a few years ago,
Xbox. It's the
I wrote
death
another
box.
book called Bet on Black about Microsoft's history in gaming. So I wanted to set the stage.
I'd be
Like
like,
Halo's important
PlayStation
because
is
Xbox
black.
was important. You needed
Oh, well,
both.
that's-
You know.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, they went hand in
Controller
hand.
should
It
weigh
definitely did.
the
I
same
remember
weight
buying
as
Halo
water
with
in your
my
hands.
Xbox on
Right.
day one.
It's the weight
That was
of
the
water
system
in
seller.
my hands. Okay.
It was
As a
it was.
statement, as a expression of the
Let's drop
brand,
that off
as
here, come back.
Also, I'm a huge wrestling fan. Rock's my favorite of all time. So any opportunity, I have to-
That was great to see him on that. I forgot
Yeah.
he did those commercials and stuff. Oh man! So looking over at that, the GoldenEye motion capture stuff, great stuff on there. But I found the story of this development team and how they came together even more fascinating. So we're talking Rare, back in the day, and were they in Ireland or where were they? Or UK?
They were over in I don't remember where specifically, but like I've even seen a lot of pictures of it. We show some in the movie, like of this, like a literal converted farmhouse where they're all just, and I think there were two main buildings, and then one was the GoldenEye team. Basically, no one on that team had ever shipped a game before, so it was just kind of no rules over there because they didn't know the rules. They were just making it up as they went.
Yeah,
and I'm glad you mentioned that you liked that part, because that's the other thing. Like what I was saying earlier about what I love to write about was, you can't really tell the stories of why the games were great unless you know at least a little about the personalities that made them, right? So it was really cool to
there's some
explore.
great personality experiences in here. How people, everyone telling how they got into gaming and/or that specific game. The experience that they were having, and nowadays we always hear a lot about feature creep, day one, bug fixes, and all this other stuff. These are things that you couldn't do back then. Back then you really had to try to end it, make it work, and because you didn't have a patch cycle back in the day. A disc came out, it came out. until things were, on the internet, AOL, Prodigy, things like that. You didn't have the ability to update your games. So, you really were under the gun to make things work. And I loved hearing how the GoldenEye team did a lot of their stuff, given, limitations of the hardware, given limitations of the license, that they thought they had and then they didn't, and how things changed. That was all great stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah. Now, but the Halo one really hit me because I spent way too much time on Halo. First, I played it single player campaign. Then I played it, campaign with co-op and everything else, Halo 2, and those games really sucked me in.
Right.
At the time, at that time I had a lot of free time on my hands, and I was getting very little sleep. I definitely was.
Same.
Now, how much Halo have you played? Have you played all of them, some of them, and out of them, which is your favorite game of the Halo series? And did you learn anything while you made this?
I really did. So I had played Halo 1 and 2. They both came out while I was in college. And I remember I didn't get an Xbox until like 2002. The game that pushed me to get it was actually WWE Raw 2, which was terrible. But as a wrestling fan, I was having a good time, right? It was ridiculous. You could set traps backstage, like boxes would fall. Sometimes they would miss. Sometimes they'd hit people in the head. So I started a rivalry with Stacy Keibler. I don't know why I did that. But I dropped a lot of boxes on poor Stacy's head. But when I got Halo, I was in college, and I had a terrible case of strep throat. So I did nothing for 3 days but just play Halo. And I have a lot of fond memories of that. Halo 2, I was the head of my college's, I was on a programming track back then, just kind of writing for fun on the side. But I hosted a Halo 2 tournament at our school. And we got copies of the game. I got the T-shirt. Our winners got a whole bunch of other cool stuff. And I really enjoyed that game. I didn't play more from there. I'm not sure why. I think it was because, like you were talking about free time. My writing career was started. I was playing the games I had to cover rather than games I just wanted to play for fun, right? So a lot of the Halo 3 multiplayer footage that you see, Chris and I captured that. He loves that game. In fact, actually last year for like a good 3 months, we have weekly FPS production meetings every Wednesday. After we finished, we'd all play Halo 3 for like an hour, whoever could hang out and play, which is a cool team exercise. But so I was playing Halo 3 for the first time then, and also first time with Chris at co-op. And I was loving it. I loved a lot of the vehicles. I loved the kind of dogfights you could have.
The Warthog was a great vehicle.
Oh, Warthog was great. I loved a lot of the the flying vehicles. I would love to go through Halo 3's campaign because I had a lot of fun just capturing footage for that game.
Yeah, I recently picked up on Steam the whole collection.
Nice.
The Master Chief Collection, which I believe technically is still missing one game that was... there was a game that was exclusive. God, which one was it? I'm trying to think which one it was. It wasn't Halo Wars. It was something in between.
Oh, ODST or Reach or something?
Yeah, I'd have to look it up. I think it was specific to it wasn't an Xbox title. That's the problem.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. It was specific to something else, but I've been playing the heck out of these. I started originally going back and trying to do it in the chronological order of how things work, and I found myself not getting into it as much. So I had to go back to I'm going to start with the original, Combat Evolved, and go that way. It's funny because prior to, I actually played Halo on my Mac because that's where they originally did a lot of their programming. Back in the day, Marathon and things like that. And it was, funny to take the same game that I'd played with mouse and keyboard and play it with a controller. Because it takes a lot of adjusting to get, into the controller. Especially if you're the kind of person that puts your DPI and your mouse up to, 6,400 and can whip across the screen in the flick of a wrist.
You know it.
So, I was... The mice we went through back in the day of Quake and Quake 2 death matches don't get me. I mean, there was even a cool controller, and you make mention, by the way, I don't even have coverage of this. You didn't give me a teaser, but we actually talk about ones that are not just person-based in first-person shooters, we talk about Descent in the show. And, that brought back some memories to me because there was a really weird controller. It almost looked like most of it as bulky. You know which one I'm going with. It looked as bulky as the Duke, but it had this orb, this circle on top of it that you could actually push in all directions and twist. Why that thing still doesn't exist, I don't know. It should, but it really should. It was the coolest thing for a game like Descent to just go ahead and have your right hand free for all the buttons and triggers and stuff, and your left hand just grabbing this orb and literally twisting it around like it's your head to what you were doing. It was, and that game was perfect with that, as well as Forsaken, both in the same kind of genre. But I like how you brought those into first person because they're still from that point of view. But most people, when they think of first person shooter, think there's a physical person involved with a weapon in their hand.
Right.
So that was cool to have that kind of stuff in there. And then after we got past that, I think once we started going to Half-Life in the documentary is where it didn't take a big turn, but it kind of just everything started opening up. There was a lot more depth to everything. And I think, let's see, we do have a Half-Life teaser on here. Let me see if we can get that up on the screen. Awesome. Da, 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 da. I got the right one. Share this tab instead. There we go. This is one I've actually recently been replaying too, even before
we started
watching
getting
the
early
show.
previews of the Half-Life content, and I remember that having a dramatic impact on my brain. I was just blown away. I was like, oh my god, this is cinematic storytelling.
The time is 8:47 a.m.
This is about the longest intro to any game ever.
Kind of made everything else.
And it's so subversive. I love it. It was really important to me to show
took FPS
as
to a whole
much
different
of it
level, in my
as we
opinion.
could, because as
No
you
smoking,
see, so many
eating,
people
or
it stuck
drinking
out
are
to them.
permitted
All these
within the
FPS
Black Mesa
designers
transit
were blown
system.
away by the
Half-Life,
direction
for the
Valve was
first time, I
taking.
felt you were kind of
Oh, yeah.
invested in a character. And
I mean,
and
it's
what
great
happens,
because you
not
could,
just
while
killing
this whole
monsters.
cinematics
There was the idea of
doing,
an
you're turning
ordinary
your head just like
guy
we're
who
seeing here.
isn't
That was
equipped
actually
to
what
deal
you
with the
probably
problems
playing this
he's
right now,
forced to
turning around and
confront.
looking
I mean,
around
that's a really
at the
compelling
whole
narrative.
More
cavern
lives
while
than
you're
your
going
own
down
may
there.
depend on your
You
fitness.
walk up and
You've
down
never
the
played this kind of
cab
game before.
and
This is something
even
new.
jump
The
up
quality
on the seats and
oozed
things
out
like
of
that. And
every moment
you
and
actually got a
every
weird
image and
opportunity
every
to kind of
encounter.
learn gameplay mechanics without being shot at.
Please contact
Yeah, and it's
So you
funny
would say,
too.
oh, yeah, there are
near the
people
end, they say,
working here.
please check
This is
around
a
you for
living,
your,
breathing
your belongings.
And I was like, I have my wallet.
Train on your way into work, which is very
that was
from
definitely
the shooters that preceded it.
a
Right?
great
It's
intro
passive,
and a great
you're just
game.
Sort of watching.
Yeah.
Missing a schedule.
So now, would you say that was one of the first to actually get story driven? I mean, we've had some stories, and most of them, as are self-admitted, were just enough to get you into the game and start doing things.
Right.
I think, what was it? Was it Quake 2 where they finally gave you a story about Strogos on that one and things like that? But so you knew you had a mission to doing that, but to me, this is definitely the one that was the most story-driven first-person shooter, until we started doing all of the Rainbow Sixes and stuff.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, and that's why I scripted these lines, this line of games the way I did.
Mm-hmm.
I think the chapter opens with first-person shooter, and then we backspace over shooter and say story. And we talk about Unreal, then we talk about Sin, and even the Trespasser. And people were very surprised to see those. But what I was doing, I wasn't trying to put those games on blast, as the kids say. I wanted to show that developers were aspiring to tell great stories, but for one reason or another, they kind of stumbled. All of this leads up to the one that did it, the first one that really got it right. And I think that I love that bridge we do where Seamus Blackley says, I'm not the first person who tried it. I was just maybe one of the first people to see what needed to happen. and then we go into Half-Life and circle back to Seamus talking about like this is what I wish we could have done with Trespassers. So I really liked that journey in the big picture of the story in the film of like, you know, coming full circle and like here's what everyone was aspiring to, and here's the paradigm shift, and nothing's going to be the same again.
Yeah, definitely liked where that went, and then we, you know, again talked about other games that that are now story driven,
Right.
and it actually it was funny when I saw that wall and you start talking about games that I've played and totally forgot, you know, and
Right.
you know, Sin, that was a great one.
It was.
You know, and Sin actually took a little bit of tongue-in-cheek humor a la Duke Nukem into it as well on a lot of stuff it did. So, but yeah, that was a great game. It was the beginning of it was more on rails when you were on the helicopter and stuff,
Right.
you know. But then it broke out into a full, you know, open world, you know, full first-person shooters. So, yeah, those were some great ones. Now, after Half-Life, the documentary kind of goes into fast-paced mode because after that, technology grew. More games are coming out faster at the same time, overlapping things like that. It's not like it used to be back in the, you know, early '90s, late '90s, where you had to get a cool game every year or two or something.
Right.
You know, at that time, the gaming magazines could go ahead and have a cool cover on this and ride that wave with
Right.
different pictures of that game for 3 or 4 times, and especially when they're talking about top tens. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
back when you had top tens, you had a game that was in the top 10 for months and months and months on end. It's
Right.
worse than the music industry. But, you know, after Half-Life, it really kind of snowballed. And then it turned into, you talk a lot about the engines that John Carmack had created, but once the Unreal Engine came out, it took on a life of its own. And it almost did before the actual game came out.
Right. Yeah,
So-
especially now today when people say Unreal, they're talking about the engine because the Unreal series has been on ice for so long. Unfortunately, I'd love to see it make a comeback. But
So would I. Unreal Tournament was great.
I loved it. You know, people always say Quake 3 or Unreal Tournament. I'm a UT99 guy. I really am, because as much as I love Quake 3, I felt like, okay, this is the kind of like the apotheosis, the final form of id Deathmatch. But UT is getting Quake wasn't really trying to be creative. It was like, this is what we've done. Let's refine it to perfection.
Yep.
UT was, let's do some deathmatch, but have really kind of wacky weapons, alternate fire, all sorts of modifiers. And I just love how creative that game was. I mean, the flat cannon is basically a shotgun and a mini rocket launcher in one.
Yep.
I just love the packages of those weapons.
Yeah, they got very creative in that,
Yeah.
and it was amazing how many games would later, you know, back then just state they were on the Unreal Engine. Nowadays, it just, you know, kind of boots across your screen as you're seeing things, and it's on. I want to say half the games you're playing. Isn't Fortnite based on the Half-Life engine? If I'm correct.
The Unreal Engine, or
I thought Fortnite was on the Unreal Engine.
Yeah. I think it would be because, of course, Epic is making it. But it's like whatever like their latest and greatest iteration is, right? So yeah.
Yeah, it came, you know, kind of full circle on that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we talked about a lot of games. We talked about a lot of the clips and stuff on there. Was there anything that you and I haven't covered here that the viewers should know about? You know, that I haven't told them yet about the documentary.
I think that, I could think of a few things. I mean, one is, you know, you'll go into this getting deep dives into classics like Halo and Duke Nukem, but you're also going to see games you probably didn't expect, such as Trespasser, maybe some others.
System Shock.
Yep, System Shock, even Marathon, just to kind of set the stage for like, here's, you know, where Bungie started, and so here's kind of the foundation that Halo is built on. And I think just go in with expectations that you're going to be surprised and pretty satisfied, because you're going to get what you want plus a cherry on top. And I think also that, you know, it's 4.5 hours. Bear in mind that even with that runtime, we couldn't include every single game we wanted to. And the more games we would have packed in, the less time each game would have had, right? We didn't want to like skimp on a Halo or a Doom. So it's very, very early talks. But
well, were there actual games on that game wall that we didn't cover
Yes.
in the? I thought there were. Yeah.
Yep, and there's actually several different versions of the game wall. So if you're
Mhm.
if you want to pause and look, you can do that too. But we are talking seriously about a sequel and even a book that goes even deeper into the story. So there's a lot of fun FPS stuff coming.
And there's a lot of stuff you can do with a book on that, because I know there have been coffee table books on the Art of Doom.
Right.
I recall getting that book and stuff like that, and there's so much stuff that's available out there. And I'm pretty sure if you wanted to just cover anything that id Software had to do, that John would have no problem talking with you about it.
He wouldn't, because I see him figuratively every day. I'm also
Wow.
a narrative
Okay.
designer at Romero Games. So I was talking with him just this morning about a story we're working on. Can't say anything about it, but anytime I want to ping this guy, I can just hit him up. So it's pretty handy.
That's awesome. And it was, again, he was on your, documentary a lot, talking about other games. And it's so great to hear his point of view on other games and everybody's other points of view on this, and loving how all this stuff kind of twisted and melded together. As you watch the documentary, you can actually see the threads forming between this and that and everything else.
It was so important to us because each segment, each game stands on its own, but also it is, as you say, a piece in a larger puzzle. And I think you'll come away from it with one of our reviews mentioned that the reviewer was born in like the late 90s, so he missed this stuff, but it gave him an appreciation for where it started and how it is relevant today. So maybe this is another comment I should make. If you want to go into this just as for the nostalgia trip, you can do that. But you're also, while you're getting hit with those like iconic moments, music, levels, etc., you're going to get a lot of insight into how and why your favorite games were made the way they were made and why they affected you. And I think people will appreciate that.
I definitely think they will, and it comes across in the documentary. Well, I'm going to go ahead and take us out here. One thing you said, or we said earlier, was how can people get their hands on this documentary? I'm going to have this video. It's now 5 p.m. almost Eastern on September 4th. This video is going to hit YouTube today. Okay. So that means if people rush after they see this and they want it really bad, and the next, I think it's 20 hours right now is left of the countdown, they can go to your website and purchase it.
fpsdoc.com.
All right, and besides purchasing it there, that's a great place to go ahead and see more teasers, get more information, things like that. I think there's little clips for view, and your co-director and things like that. So, if you want to learn more, fpsdoc.com. You want to purchase it here before, I think it's, I'm actually going to go look right now and see what the countdown says. fpsdoc.com. It is telling me we have 22 hours and 2 minutes left. So in my book, that means 2 p.m. tomorrow.
Right.
Is Eastern, no, 3 p.m. Eastern
3 p.m.,
tomorrow is how long you got to purchase this on their website. And after that, I'm going to go ahead and give you a link inside the show description on how to follow. Is that, are we following FPS Doc on Twitter or X or whatever it's called nowadays? Okay.
Yep.
So I'll have the link for you guys to go ahead and follow that on the service formerly known as Twitter, and you can find out where the documentary is available for sale, because this is going to roll between different providers.
You'll still be able to get it, but we're going to have working on special promotions and things with different distributors. I think gamers will recognize a lot of them, and you will still get, no matter where you buy it, you will get the movie in its entirety. You get the extras. It'll be really fun.
Hold on, there are extras I haven't seen yet?
There are, for example, with the digital version, we did about an hour-long behind-the-scenes interview with Robin interviewed me, Chris, and Richard about the production process. You can check that out.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll go ahead and buy in for that. And there's also 3 desktop wallpapers and some other things as well.
Yeah, full details. That's the funny thing. Like, I've been so focused on the writing and directing, I couldn't even tell you everything in all the different packages that we had. But you'll get details on fpsdoc.com and at fpsdoc on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm seeing digital copy of the film, original soundtrack from New Retro Wave, 3 exclusive desktop backgrounds, a PDF overview, and a Discord link is what it's currently saying right now.
Okay, yeah, I forgot. I wrote that PDF overview, so hopefully people people like it.
I actually perused that earlier to kind of go and get a feel for what the heck to ask you.
Right.
So,
okay. Cool.
All right. Well, stick around till after I do this last teaser. I want to talk to you for another second or two afterwards. But I'm going to go ahead and show the very last teaser in its entirety, so people can get a feel for what is on here and where to get it. So add this to the stream and share our Unreal trailer. So I'll let it play the full 2 minutes since we've
so much of the
got
first
information on
Unreal
the
and
end of
later
this
Unreal
how
Tournament
to
were
get
developed
the
virtually,
documentary.
right in the early days of the internet. And I remember sitting in my apartment in Southern California. I got a phone call from Mark Rain.
Again,
I'm playing
it's great
Quake
because
one, right?
we're showing
and he's like,
other
you need to download this
games
mod
at
for
the
this.
same
It's called the
time as we
Reaper
go
bot.
through this.
Suddenly, I'm offline, but I'm
Now
playing
we're
against
looking at
opponents
Quake
that are
in
as good
terms
as human
of
players.
how this
And I
related
was
to
like, what is
Unreal.
this? And Mark's like,
Yeah,
there's
I
this
loved all
programmer,
those,
a network
little
programmer out of
threads that
IBM,
she
this guy
said
named Steve
earlier.
Polge. He coded this up as a mod himself, and we're going to try and recruit him to do the AI for Unreal. Years later, Steve came on board, wound up doing really, really cool AI
And
for
it's
the
funny,
Scar and
people
all
who
the
play
creatures in
modern
Unreal,
games
which
right now
later
have no
transferred
idea
over to Unreal
how
Tournament and the AI in Unreal
bad
Tournament.
bots used to
and
be.
it's yet another example of
Nowadays,
something cool
bots can
coming out of the
smoke
mod scene
you
that winds
in
up being
most
massively
games.
influential across the entire business.
Back in the 90s when
Even in
Unreal came out, it was
Nintendo
still
Switch
on
Sports, they actually
56K
have
dial-up, so to be
sliders
able to just
for
play multiplayer
your
against
opponent,
bots,
your
still
computer
kick your
opponents.
ass.
You know,
It's
do I want them to be,
You
high,
had
low,
to
or
manually
beat my
path
butt?
the environments.
Right.
You had to like run tests with the bots, follow them to make sure they didn't
But
look
yeah,
stupid, to
Unreal
make sure
did
that
have
they
some
were
serious,
playing as good as
good
human
bots.
players.
You know,
It made you a better player at first-person shooters.
Time consuming
period.
to develop and code,
I lived in the
imagine.
country.
But I know that a lot of the AI that they used for the bots,
and, 14.4 dial-up, not going to happen.
basically what
I
just
played
got
against
carried over from
bots
the single
all
player.
the time, unless I
Again,
was
it's
with
probably why
friends
that
on
single
LAN.
player was so good because it actually had
Yeah,
challenging combat.
bots were good training for a while there.
Definitely.
All right, so there's a few shout-outs. That's all the stuff we talked about. Yeah,
My
that's a
wife
classic.
She couldn't believe I put this at the end of the trailer, and I was like, "Honey, I'm making art." Okay.
And that scene is actually discussed inside the documentary
It is.
in detail. It is.
Yes.
Well, David, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to review the screener, to speak with you for a good hour here about the documentary and to share your insight on it. I really hope that folks who are into first-person shooters find this as a great deal and go out and check it out. It's well worth the $24.99. I'm pretty sure the digital was actually selling for more than that on the Kickstarter, but you had your names and stuff added to it and things like that. Are those names going to be in what we see when we purchase it? Or do we get to see those people in the credits now?
You will, yes.
Are they getting like producer titles and things like that and stuff?
It depended on the title, but there are different levels. Like, for example, there's a section for the backers who contributed gameplay. There's a section for backers who were, producers, associate producers, etc.
Cool. Yeah, I'd like to check that out. A lot of folks I know in the podcasting industry do that very same thing. If you donate this much via Patreon a month, you're a producer, you're an executive producer, and yada yada yada. And it's cool to give people credit like that.
It is.
I definitely
It's
do.
something people really appreciate. You're becoming part of gaming history when you do that. So it's fun.
Definitely. Well, guys, if you're interested, fpsdoc.com is where you want to go to learn more. Again, till 3 p.m. on the 5th Eastern Time of September. You can go ahead and purchase it there. Otherwise, I'll get you a link to their Twitter account and follow along where it's available when you want to purchase it. Perfect. I can't, say enough about this. It really is great stuff.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
You too, David. Just hang on. Let me give this outro slide here, and then I'll be right back with you. All right.